I'm literally gonna wait for you. And I see you're gonna be like, nah, I'm not gonna like. I'm just keep watching. Just subscribe. And you think the clip gonna cut right here, but it's not because I'm still waiting for you to click that like button, and the subscribe, and the post notification button.
So we're back again for another episode of Random Anime Thoughts, of which I've kind of decided to give the acronym RAT, which is kind of weird, but it's kind of catchy in my head, so I'm just gonna stick with it. And this is episode 3, which means that at some point I need to start numbering these things or else I'll lose track. Because what I'm about to talk about is something that has been pretty invasive, in that it's been a genre of anime that has invaded every single season. And it's kind of weird that we're at that point, but I remember a time where this genre almost didn't exist. In fact, I didn't even know what it was called a long time ago. And this genre is called Isekai. Now listen, Isekai is a pretty interesting genre and it has a good amount of shows, but the issue is it's kind of gotten a bit bloated, because at this point, honestly, what is an Isekai? Because every single season there's a bunch of shows, and as soon as they have, the description fantasy, you start to ask yourself, well, ooh, what is this interesting fantasy anime that I could watch? And then when you read the synopsis, you're always weirdly hit with the magical words that something happens, blah 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 blah, they die, they're reborn, and then immediately it's like, oh, isekai. And this is kind of troubling, because at this point, what is an isekai and what isn't an isekai? Because when you have anime like Mushoku Tensei or ReZero, are those isekai or just really good fantasy anime? A recent issue that I came across was Shangri-La Frontier, because when I first watched the trailer for the first part, I was confused as to whether this would be an isekai in which basically a character gets stuck in a video game and has to, well, survive and find his way out, only to find out that it was just a gaming anime. But that's just another issue that happens when you have isekai, because the gaming genre of anime usually gets shoved into isekai, especially if it's an immersive type of video game where the person becomes a different character or whatever. Even though it may not be an isekai, people could easily say that this is an isekai just acting as if it's not an isekai. And I find this to be troubling, because I don't know why isekai is so popular, because every single season there's a huge amount of isekai that you can pick from. But it seems as though with isekai it's more of a quantity than quality issue, because I'm not even sure if you could name 5 good isekai that have dropped in the last 2 years. Now listen, there are some cool ones, like that time I was reincarnated as a slime, that was pretty cool, but after a while the formula kind of just gets repetitive, to the point that whenever you read a synopsis and you hear that, oh, someone died and now they're reborn, which technically is what an isekai is, you kind of just switch off, because a lot of shows present themselves as fantasy anime or just look good, but as soon as you read those magical words, you then realize that it's an isekai and you kind of lose interest, which is something that I just see as problematic, because at this point the genre of fantasy and gaming and other genres as well have just been lost under the title of isekai. The issue with isekai that I've noticed is that sometimes it doesn't really have a good path. Now what I mean by this is that it's cool that you got reincarnated and now you're the man or woman and you're the most powerful person out there. Ultimately, this character who lived a life that they weren't really proud of or didn't want gets a new lease on life, I guess, and then has to live in that world. But what does it lead to? Ultimately, it never really leads to anything worth investing your time in, which is one of the reasons why I think people don't want to invest their time in isekai, except for the special type of isekai that pop up, like Mushoku Tensei, who are able to take you into like an isekai world, but there's something there. There's a path and there's growth within that anime that make you realize that this is an isekai that is done excellently. But then honestly, for that one awesome anime, there's probably 10 worse anime, which then kind of makes me wonder, what is the point of the isekai genre in general if it's just gonna keep on shoving not good anime at us, and also masking anime that could potentially be good? Because at this point, once you see that an anime is potentially a fantasy or a gaming anime, you may lose interest. I've heard people literally say that Tokyo Revengers is an isekai because the character died, well, initially, and then went back in time. It's a long story. But just the fact that if a character dies within the first episode, everyone just knows isekai, and it's just gotten to that point, which then just leaves me wondering, what is the point of isekai? It's a genre that is super populated in that every season is jam-packed, but what is the point? When was the last time an isekai anime actually stood out and could compete with other genres of anime? It's been a while, and honestly, it's kind of weird to see that this genre is carried by a few amazing shows, but it's the most produced genre of anime every single year, and it just happened out of nowhere, but I'm assuming because it was relatively successful at the time. But right now, honestly, isekai doesn't have that impact. It just has this negative stigma attached to it that it could potentially ruin shows that could be good just because of the fact that they're linked to being an isekai. I could understand how someone could mistake a show like Solo Leveling as an isekai pretty easily, because the genre of isekai has just been that bloated that shows like a Solo Leveling could be shoved under there. But is it really an isekai? I'd probably say no. So at this point, I just wonder, what is the point of this genre, because it's doing more bad than good. But once again, I could just be ranting about things that I don't like, and maybe I'll find out that there's a huge crowd of people who love isekai, and ultimately it's one of the most popular genres in anime ever, which it's not, because if you look at like manga sales, isekai aren't even in the top 10 most of the time. But hey, maybe there's something I don't know. But if you have any thoughts about what I said or what I was kind of just thinking, well, let me know. And well, I guess I'll see you next week, because I'm trying to do this every single week. Now it's going to be pretty interesting trying to figure out a schedule, but we'll see how it goes. But anyway, see you guys later.